Thank you for tuning in to the Mix with Ty. We're so glad that you're spending some of your day with us. It is a rainy day here in Texas, and I'm overlooking Six Flags, and it seems like people have decided to still go. Bless their heart. Um, but as I say always, it is a good day no matter where you are, no matter what the weather is like, because God woke you up this morning, and we are glad about it. I'm excited today because I have a friend of mine on the phone who is an entrepreneur extraordinaire, and he keeps me with guests and from all over the country doing a lot of major great things. And he's actually venturing out on his next project. He's written a book that we've talked about, but we're doing a children's book today. I would like you to welcome to the Mix with Ty, Kellen and Tina Coleman. How y'all doing, guys?
We're doing good. Thank you for having us, Ty.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I was going to let her talk first since, I haven't met a microphone I did not like. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know you're going to probably try to hog the conversation, but I think Tina can carry, can hold her own.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm excited because the children's book that you guys have just released is the first in a series, and it is about your daughters. Tell us a little bit about how that got started.
Well, the London and Sydney book, it really started when we first had our first child, London. And I wanted to do some type of business for her that I could create and that she could take and just take on her own. So I thought about clothing, and clothing is expensive, and I had some little things mocked up, but we travel so much because that's what we like to do. Some folks like to buy Gucci and Coach and, get all the yaki in the world. And some folks like to put their money into traveling. And I started having this idea to create a book of our travels, from Mexico to all the different states and whatever countries we would go to. And I started it. I made a page. This was like 4 or 5 years ago in Lubbock, Texas. It was very expensive page to make. And, we at some point down the line, 4 or 5 years later, I said, let's really turn this into a book, and found an artist through a fellow friend and journalist, Cyrus Webb, and we found Ron Bryant. And I needed Tina on this project because I know nothing about real art. I can do stories, I can create, but she actually can draw a little bit.
Right.
And I'll let I'll let her interject.
Oh, well, thank you for asking that, Ty. It's interesting how two people can be living the same experience and have totally different ideas of what inspired them. Kellen, I would say, was the visionary. He had this idea first. But for me, the reason why I was interested in doing this book was I didn't grow up in this country, as you can probably tell from my accent. But coming from Africa here, I was very perturbed when my daughter was initially born, my first daughter, London. I could not find any stories that told Black people's stories that were not necessarily clouded in civil rights movement or racism or slavery or anything else. I just wanted to find stories that my daughter could relate to. And it got so bad, we were shipping books from Africa, trying to order books from Canada. And for me, that's what really motivated me to write a book, is to write a book that my daughters could read and see themselves in those stories and identifying with them. Not saying that the issues that we talked about are not serious issues or pertinent issues. They are. But there's more to the Black stories and the Black experience than that.
Right.
And I think that when mainstream media tries to narrow down or tries to stifle your narrative to just one thing, that's when people try to put you in a box. And I do not like that. So for me, what inspired me to write this book was because I wanted to write stories that represented our experience. And that's what is pushing me, and that's what's encouraging, because I want to write stories that my daughters can read and enjoy. And they believe that, as like Kellen said, it also documents your experience as well.
Right. I like that. And one of the reasons why I love the idea is just for that reason. A lot of the stories and print material does not give a a wide variety of the life experience of black children, and they don't see
Mm-hmm.
themselves in a lot of the media that is out there. And I think it's vital, especially for our daughters, that they see themselves as beautiful no matter what shade they are. They see themselves as able to do anything. So that's one of the, and I love the travel piece, because I think a lot of times, especially in the African American experience here, our kids don't travel, and they don't get a chance to see our kids doing the things that they hear of their Caucasian counterparts doing, like spending the summer in Disneyland, or traveling to Paris for a week, or taking a summer off and traveling here, or going on mission trips. I think it gives us a different experience that our kids can look forward to as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people, there are a lot more black people traveling than is probably documented. The problem is we don't have necessarily a well laid out platform to talk about it.
Right.
Like, to me, it was just shocking when I go to the bookstore, go to Barnes and Noble, and it's like, oh, look at this book. Here's Katie, the black girl, whatever, fine. And then you keep reading on page 5, and they're like, by the way, there's racism. And you're like, come on. Like, black people in the city are going to talk about racism all day. We talk about it a lot, but
Right.
we have other experiences. And then you look at a book, and it's like a whole series about Barbie going to the beach. We're like, we want to go to the beach too, you know?
Right,
So it's
right,
like,
right.
we have all those experiences. Go ahead.
Right, I totally agree. In that we can't inundate our kids with issues and not, showing a diverse and our appetite or palate for what we read or what we consume. So I like that. So tell us a little bit about how difficult was it to get into publishing this book? Because I know on our show we talk to a lot of people who have done this for the first time, and they don't know exactly how to go about doing it. And I'm actually looking at the book now, and it is absolutely excellent. So how did you go about finding the people to work with, getting the story pulled together the way you wanted, and then publishing?
Well, after I mentioned, it's really interesting how everything formed together and trying to find the right artist. I thought I had the right artist, but it was also important to me. I like to be able to hire my own, if I can. And so Ron Bryan is a African American illustrator, and Cyrus Webb is a African American journalist out of Mississippi, whatnot, and author, and he, does a lot of other things. But once we got the team together, so we get the illustrator, and Tina and I, we start talking about our different ideas, which we have a lot of different ideas.
Very different.
People can go behind the scenes on my YouTube at Kellen Cash, and I'm actually working on putting a little mini documentary to show people how easy or difficult it was to put this together, because I had a vision. And one thing about a creative, and people see this, they think Kanye West and people are crazy, but you need to have your vision laid out a certain way. But what I really lacked, and even Ron, the illustrator, said, thank God we had Tina, because both you and I, we could not have picked up the clothes together, the imaging of the face and everything. She's very detail-oriented, where I'm more of, let's just kind of lay it out. We'll let the editors, and she's, has that type of eye and vision. So putting it together, the stories were already done. I mean, I had them laid out. I knew where I wanted the girls to go, but I could not, for the life of me, have set them up the way they are image-wise. And that's a fight, because I have to also fight, the ideas that I had originally to merge with hers. And that's just marriage, period. You got to learn how to work together when, and so, that it was. In the publishing aspect of it, we're on Flamenco Publishing, which London and Sydney, their middle name is Flamenco. Menki is a village in Cameroon, and the folk is a title meaning chief. And so people say, well, are you self-published? Well, we're under Flamenco Publishing. We just happen to own it. And because this is my second book, I knew the mistakes I made in my first book, which a lot of, first-time authors find out what mistakes you made after you publish the book. So I said, I'm not going to make those mistakes again. I'll have to make some other ones. And for every book in this series, there'll be a mistake and there'll be a lesson learned.
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything Kellen said, Ty. I think to give a lot of credit to Ron Bryant, their illustrator, he did a very good job because it's not easy to work with very, very opinionated people.
Right.
And I, to be honest, I'm very opinionated. And then halfway through the design contest, I'm like, Ron, just give me control of this drawing board thing you're doing. Let me just draw it, trying to get my mother-in-law's bob to fall the high. He didn't know what a bob was. I'm like, that's not a bob. I need a bob, okay?
Because what man knows what a bob is? I still don't know what a bob is. I'm looking at the book.
So, but he was very patient throughout this whole experience, and I think for me, it didn't feel like work because this book is dedicated to Kellen's mom. That's a big part of why we wanted to document this as well. She passed away last year, and so for us, that was a way of chronicling her time on this earth and having the girls remember her in this way. Right. And again, the story is what our daughters lived. It's not like fictional. They went to all these places. So the storyline itself was super easy to come up with because we could just look at our pictures.
Right.
And that makes the book real unique because people say, oh, children's book, it has to be fiction. And it's not a fiction book. Now, it could be in that category because in one of the pages where they're, eating African food in an African restaurant, there's a fish giving a thumbs up. And there was no fish that had a real thumb with his eyes open and mouth, but they were really eating at the African restaurant. So it's a nonfiction and, has a cartoon aspect to it. And that's kind of a different area, a different genre because many children's books are just fiction.
Right. Well, I do like the idea of, it being their life, and they can actually, instead of looking at pictures as well as go back and look at a book that was written about it. I think I love that idea, and also something that they can take on and once they get older, write their own stories and publish their own. So it's a legacy that you started for them as well. How difficult is it working together? I know Frida and I bump heads all the time because, anytime like you said, Kellen, I'm really vision oriented and I have a way that I see things, but she's creative as well. So she's more detailed and more the financial mind behind stuff. So I do understand that dynamic. So tell us a little bit about how that works as a couple when you're doing business together and coming together working on a project.
So from my perspective, it was easy because I think we just had different ideas of how things work. I grew up in a large family of 8. Okay. I have 7 siblings, and everybody's opinionated. So I had no trouble really getting my opinion heard. I think for me, the biggest challenge just came because Kellen, like you said, he has a certain timeline, and he wants to get the project done, put it out on this date, or put it out. I'm more of a person like, if it's not right, I'm not putting it out. Because once you publish it, that's your name attached to it. And Kellen's like, oh, we'll just fix it later. And I'm like, no. Right. And then to talk to Ron to redo this part. But we had to find an area of compromise because if I was in charge of this project, the book would not be published right now. That's for sure. Right.
Yeah, and working, he tends to be kind of pushy.
Yeah. Well, time isn't forever, and I really, every day I have to tell myself that because we're running multiple businesses now, and things have to get done in a certain timeline. And I know when payroll is, I know when people want to get paid. They need to get paid. So time isn't forever. And this is, people would say a passion project because until last week, it wasn't making any money. And so bumping heads, you're going to bump heads. But the reason why I really appreciate Tina in every venture that I've ever done is she gives her honest opinion. There is no yes man mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my creative vision this time. But even when she has her own businesses that she does. And, I give my little spiel, and she then gets to see it when she's creating something and somebody is saying, oh, no, I would actually do it this way.
Right.
In that pushback. And it can get real. I mean, real words are going to be said. We would love to say we said all these things in Christian love, but that's not the case. It wasn't all Christian love. It was, you're taking my vision and you're trying to make it something else. And that's personal.
Right.
Real personal. But we also have to know, what I'll do is she'll tell me something, I'll hate it. And then if I come back in like maybe 6 hours, maybe a day, and I say, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's just adjust it a little like this. Because like she said, the book would not be out right now if I wasn't so pushy, because she's detail oriented. She could probably find things that she'd still want to change. There were some changes she wanted to make at the last minute and add more pages. And I said, no way. I'm running out of money for this project.
Right.
And I said, Flamenco Publishing, the executives over there say no, which, like I said, we own it, but we're also trying to tie in other people into this vision, because the children's book market, there's a lot of black authors out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to any black book festival, you will see that. The problem is, how do we find them? And that is based on a lot of things. How well the authors are marketing. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of authors are only going on Amazon. They're only putting their book on Amazon, and they don't know how to go through the library space. And we know how to get into the libraries. We've bought software. We've bought mentorship. I know how to get into the libraries, and we need more black books to go into the library systems.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I think Kellen has done a fab. Kellen literally he studied publishing, children's book publishing for almost, 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And he was reading at least a book a week every day at the library, just taking notes, calling people, making contacts. And prior to even starting Flamenco Publishing, which Flamenco is my maiden name. That's my father's name, so mm-hmm. It was kind of it's a family thing. And I love that it's turned into this beautiful thing where we can give back and provide a platform for other people to tell their stories. This would mean nothing if all we did was just tell the stories about our daughters and then moved on. Right. But to provide a platform for other black, I would encourage anyone listening, if you've ever thought about it or dreamt about it, get in contact with Kellen. Let him walk you through it. It's not that hard to do. If you have a story or an idea, he can put you in contact with either illustrators, publishers, or potentially publish it through Flamenco Publishing and make your dream a reality as well.
Very good. London and Sydney, Explore the World. And the first book is Texas. Are you guys planning on doing a push for other countries to put the book into the hands of other nationalities, other countries?
Yes, the book I already have a translated version for French, mm-hmm. and I'm considering doing one for Spanish. I'm going to roll out the French first because a lot of Africa is French speaking. Right. There's a lot of other countries that are French speaking. Plus, it will help my girls get their French down, because that's something. My wife is bilingual or trilingual, and I want them to be able to get as much as they can verbally and written. I kind of dreamt my wife up. I knew I wanted a bilingual wife who wouldn't mind traveling every chance we got. I just thought I'd be picking the destinations based on my life, not hers. But that's for the next phase of our life. In 3 years, we'll all actually be able to pick. But we are gonna make a push. The library system that I have is not just for this country. I have 3 other countries' library databases that we will be pushing to their libraries, because we're not just gonna, the story is international.
Right.
One thing you know about Texans, everywhere you go out of this country, you'll find some Texans. Americans really don't travel much. Only I think it's 70% don't have a passport.
Mm-hmm.
But every place I've gone, Texans are always there. And even on tours, people say, how many people from Texas? And at least one person will raise their hand wherever we go. So, you know, the Texas story in itself is a story that is worldwide, and everybody knows Texas.
Wow, very good.
Yeah, I think, speaking about international countries as well, I think that like Kellen said, most of the places on the back page of the book, you can actually take a look. It says the next few stories and the next few cities we're going to look at. But there are a few countries in Africa, there's some countries in Europe, and clearly some in Asia as well that I would like to hit up and go to. And so the more we tell this story, French is my first language, so it's very important for me and my daughters to have that experience in French as well, and at least to my native country, which is Cameroon, to be able to push that book in the school system as well. So that's something we're looking and working on.
Right. I love it because it gives people in other countries a look at what our life is really like.
Yes.
And I know a lot of times you talk to, and I work with kids, and you ask them about what they think other people's lives in different parts of the world, and Texas is like a melting pot, especially Arlington. You find people here from anywhere. And I was in one school that had about 26 nationalities represented, and there was this beautiful African little girl who spoke beautiful French, and it blew the kids' mind because I guess they think they don't have realistic ideas of what life like is outside of this country. So I think it's a good way to show. To kind of show our experience, back and forth as well. So I'm looking forward to the total series coming out. We're going to get out and get some commercials done, and we'll be right back. And we are back. And Kellen is still talking. And Kellen is still talking. We're back, and he's still talking. Thank you for continuing to tune into the Mix with Ty. We are enjoying our conversation on air and off air with the Colemans. And talking about their new children's book that they just released, and we're very, very excited about it. And it is London and Sydney Explore the World. And the first release is London, The Adventures of Sydney and London in Texas. Tell us a little bit about. We were off air. We were actually talking, Tina, about controlling our narrative, and you dropped some information on me that I know, but just hearing it from your perspective just kind of illuminated it for me again. Tell us what we were talking about.
So for me, thank you again for having us, Ty, first of all. For me, owning your narrative is something that's been so ingrained in me by my parents. And I learned from the best, really. And I looked at the British Empire. For years, the history of the world was only told through the eyes of a British man. Right now, English is not even the most commonly spoken language. Mandarin Chinese is. At 1.3 billion people speaking it. However, if you want to do business in today's world, you have to speak English. If you want to do movies or entertainment, English is the language that everyone uses. And that was because the British Empire for years had the foresight to say, we want the world story to be told through us. Even the story of this nation is a nation that's birthed from an English empire, whether or not we want to acknowledge that. And so understanding psychologically what that does for you is when you take a decision to own your narrative, there's a certain freedom in that, and freedom in the ability to write your own story up to the level that you want, because all of a sudden you don't need permission to dream certain things or to craft some certain things or to bring certain things to reality. So for me, part of writing this book is learning how to own a narrative and telling the children how we own a narrative. If you're waiting for somebody else to write stories about Black children, you'll be waiting for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that once parents really, because who writes children's books? Parents do usually. When parents start writing stories that they want their children to read, then you take away the power of take away the ability of other people to tell you what kind of stories your kids can read. You don't have to worry about what's going on Disney Channel, because you can just go to Hulu and or Roku and download an African channel or Mandarin channel or Asian channel, whatever you want. And that's what I find so exciting about today's world, is the ability to get information out there with accuracy and with speed.
Right. I totally agree. And, having control of our narrative is something that I've been talking about for years, too, because I think a lot of our narrative here, especially African American, has been a negative one. And even presented to the rest of the world has been negative, that we're only concerned about finances and things and whatnot. And that's not who we are in our totality. You know what I'm saying? And and I do love it because you guys are taking on giving a different narrative than what is already out there. And
even if you look at sorry to interrupt you, Ty, but if you look at the African narrative, when I came to this country at 18 and I heard about what people's experiences of Africa were and the way Africa was portrayed in the media, I would laugh so hard, and I was like, wow, I didn't know Africa was that bad. I guarantee I was not living a better lifestyle than half the people here. And it's so funny how people can take your story and tell it in their context, and all of a sudden that story becomes the way that everyone views you.
Right.
Which is incredibly, because before I came to the U.S., my idea of African Americans literally was pretty much New Jack City. Okay? Right. That was my idea of what the average African American experience was. And it was going to Grambling was really an eye opener, because it allowed me to experience African American culture in a way that I never would have otherwise. And I didn't even think I would marry an African American, which I ended up marrying, and it's been a wonderful. We've known each other now for 15 years. Yeah. Been married for 10, but it's so important to not give your personal power away by allowing someone to tell your stories. These stories are going to get told one way or another. You can either play a role in telling them or complain about them when they're not told to your satisfaction. You pick. Right.
And unfortunately, I've been upset about the narrative that we're giving the world now, is that we're all, the housewives of Atlanta, or we're thugs or not. And I think that we kind of fall into a trap because the money is good in continuing to portray ourselves in those fashions, instead of looking a little deeper and saying the damage that it does to our community when you only give one narrative. That means when people see you, they see what they know. They're not going to encounter you until they meet you face to face. But whatever they see in print, whatever they see in the media, that is how they're going to see us. And until we put out a different storyline that tells the totality of who we are, we're going to continue to have the problems that we have now. And I think that is why it is so easy. And I know you're not going to want to get a little political here, but it's so easy for them to come in and kill us the way they have been, because of the narrative that people see. They don't see us as everyday human beings who have the same feelings and experiences that they have. So I'm glad that you guys are taking a different take on presenting our story.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that African Americans in this country definitely dehumanized in the media, for sure. There's no depth within the stories that we tell. The humanity in our experience has been stripped. And now it seems like most of the time we're in media, it's either for entertainment, be it sports or pop culture or whatever else you want to call it. Now, I'm not going to knock another black person's hustle. You do what you have to do. But at the same time, I don't think that the answer to this is taking away the opportunities like the Real Housewives. Even if you close that show, you would find 5 more women that would be willing to do it. Right. And trust me, the ones in New Jersey are just as crazy. So the answer to that, I think, is to put out 100 more positive stories. You can for every negative story, it takes about 10 to 20 more positive stories to drown it out. So if Kellen and I were doing research on children's books, and we saw that only 15% of all children's books in this country are written about non-white people.
Wow.
And out of those 15%, this is including Black, Asian, Chinese, or whatever, Spanish, Hispanic, all everybody else is only 15%. And out of those 15%, about 30% of the writers are Caucasian. So you're looking at first of all, we don't even get a story told that often. And then when you do, it's told by people that are not minorities.
Okay.
And that for me is very, very concerning.
You just cracked my head right quick. Let me slow down. You mean to tell me out of 100%, so only 15% are told about minorities, period?
Yes, period.
And then out of that 15% that the books are written, 30% of those 15% are written by white people.
Yes.
So our stories aren't even being told to us in that small percentage by us.
Yes.
Wow.
And I guarantee you the Black books make the least percent of all of those books, because that 15% includes Chinese, Hispanic, everything else.
Wow. I know we've been joined by Elisa, one of my other co-hosts, and I think we're going to have to start writing some children's books.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that blows me away. I'm so glad that we're talking about this. Our children need to read. Literacy is so important. But equally important is when they open those books, they need to see themselves. How do they know that beauty looks like them, that intelligence looks like them, that culture, talent, being bright, that looks like them if they don't see it? And one of the best ways to show someone something new is to show them in a book. So thank you so much for what you're sharing with us. And you're right, Ty. I think we need to get to writing, don't we?
Oh, yeah. But, yeah.
Yeah, I invite any parent that's for every book that you see that you don't like or that you don't see your child in, you should write a book, because that's how people push their narrative forward. That's how communities. The problem is, no matter how much we try, the narrative in this country is always going to be defined by the way a white male sees it, because that's the population that controls economics, finances, the publishing rights, and everything else. Even in medicine, which is my field of interest, white women are just barely scratching that ceiling, and they're getting pushed down. So I think that to make a change, we have to consciously say, okay, I don't like this. I'm going to provide an alternative instead of just complaining.
Yeah. Wow.
I think you're right, but I also think that a part of what muddies the water for creative people who have stories to tell is, what do you do next? How do you find an illustrator? I think the how-to, just because you have the story doesn't mean that you have the illustrations to go along with the story. And then once you have an illustrator, like, what do you do after that? You know what I'm saying? I think for a lot of people, the passion is there, but I'm glad you're here to talk to us, because I think a lot of people just don't know, what do you do next? I'm creative, I have energy, but what next?
Yeah, and that was my next question to you guys, Kellen, because you say you have a relationship. How do you find someone? And it's to me not really much about finding someone. It's about finding and working with people that you can trust. That right there. That Yeah, go there.
Well, I told you my illustrator, Ron Bryant, was introduced to me via Facebook, and social media is something we all use, and we just have to use it the proper way. I mean, I've gone multiple places and had friends before I even got there because of social media. But Ron Bryant, who, people can contact us or email Ron. There are plenty of Black illustrators, especially minority illustrators, plenty of illustrators, whoever you want to use, and you can find who you can trust. Because when I first had this concept, I just found someone who was good, and he was good, but I wanted someone who could get deeper into the story and understood us on this journey all the way. So to find illustrators, there are groups and organizations just for children's books, just for any genre, but the Society of Children's Books is an organization. There's so many out there where if you really do your studying, which Tina had said earlier, I took, at least 3 or 4 months just reading and networking. You can find hundreds of illustrators. I have cards of over a dozen illustrators after this book was published, because once we published, people were, hey, so-and-so's an illustrator. You ever need an illustrator? But the thing is the studying part. And this is why most businesses aren't successful, because people don't study. I used to have a professor who said, students don't study. And it's true. Students try to memorize. Students try to skim, but they don't study what's happening. So once you study the industry, you find out that you can find thousands of illustrators, no matter what they look like, whatever, your preference is, and you can find them. And then you want to find out what the publishing. Yes, you can self-publish very easy on Amazon, but you can't get in one library unless you know the librarian, because libraries don't buy from Amazon. That's, they just don't do that at this point. So there's methods you have to go through. And I had an advantage. I mean, I won't lie. I had an advantage because I run a PR firm and a consulting firm, and I've had clients who are authors and who've done movies and music. So I have to learn to be an expert in so many things, and that's how I make my living. But you just really have to find a team, and you also have to, and black folks especially, have to be able to pay that team, because this costs a good amount of money per page. And I don't want to say what, because everyone will hit Ron up, and his price may have doubled by now. But it's expensive to do. But we've also have found illustrators in Africa now that we're going to start working with Ron, and so we can get these books out a little quicker. And it, money-wise, because it just doesn't grow on trees for any of us. But there are illustrators in Africa waiting for people to say, yeah, use us. We're good. We know what we're doing. And you know what? The hardest part about working with them so far in Africa is paying them, because because Africa, if you look at 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago, in 2000, Africa wasn't even on Yahoo's radar. They had the whole map world out. Africa had no dots, nothing. YouTube still does not allow Africa to get paid off their YouTube videos. Wow. PayPal does not let me pay my Malawian artist. They say there's a glitch in the system. We know about it, but we need to fix it. But you can pay Romania and everywhere else. So I have to go, and it costs me money to send money to Malawi, and I have to do it. I had to find 4 different ways to try to get money to Malawi. So Africa, they still want to cut us off. They know once we can tap into those resources, it's over for black Americans. If we can use Africans, if we can use whoever we choose to use, being free people. So, I mean, we just have to study, and I'll stop.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, that's amazing. I think for a lot of people who are creative, who have the interest and certainly believe, I love what Tina said around the narrative. We do have to find a way to get beyond complaining. And some of us, we do it so well, we do a really good job discussing the problem. But I think children's books, increasing literacy, reaching our youth, what an excellent way to address so many of the issues that we're dealing with. And what is scary to me is that, I kind of understand if you're said, I don't like it, but I intellectually understand your prejudice if you're over 70. But I don't understand the prejudice that I saw, less than 2 years ago at the University of Oklahoma, kids singing these racist songs, as a part of their pledge process. I don't understand some of the hate that I've seen in our schools toward kids of varying sexual orientation. So prejudice, hate, all of these issues, obviously, this is not a 70-plus problem. This is a youth problem. And one of the ways that we can address that is by diversifying what kids are ingesting and helping them to see all of these beautiful images in a multiplicity of colors. So thank you so much for everything that you're sharing. And you're right, study is a part of everything, so obviously it's got to be a part of this as well. And I also love the piece on working internationally. Ty and I always talk about the fact that, Isn't it amazing? Just a few years ago, we were all praying the prayer of Jabez, asking the Lord to enlarge our territory. Well, that didn't just mean getting on a plane. It meant what we're doing now, internet radio. It meant, working more globally, having a more international focus.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you're right. We've got all these amazing artists, creative people all over the world. So, I don't know that any one person is ever able to accomplish anything by themselves. So anything great,
Mm-hmm.
requires a partnership. So thinking internationally, just what great tidbits you guys are sharing.
Yeah, and to say what Kellen said, there are certainly challenges in working internationally, but there are vast benefits. Number one, you benefit from someone else's experience, the way to see the world. We had someone do like pictures of London and Sydney, and it was interesting to have this African artist write it, draw the pictures, because it was totally different than what Kellen and I had imagined. It was so beautiful too, and I think that even though working internationally is a challenge, I think that the only way to because money. Let me tell you this: interest follows money. Interest follows money. If you find a way to work with international artists, which quite honestly costs less than a tenth of what the artists here in the U.S. cost, and don't focus only on one. If you think about things globally, right? Life is like a chess game. You can't bring like rules you used to play draft or whatever. What do you guys call draft? Checkers in this country.
Right.
The rules of checkers, the rules of chess are different. Like a king makes different moves and can move across different compared to a queen, compared to a jack. So you have to understand that even though, like Kellen and I have had so many failed projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've tried to write books international, we've tried to write like magazines international, work with artists internationally that did not necessarily bloom to the way we wanted it to bloom. But that experience that he used internationally, and that maybe cost us a few $100s, which really is not that much, it helped us to push this book. So every experience is valuable, and there's that fear of trust. Like I said, how do you find someone you can trust? You can't. You can't even always trust your partner in marriage. You just have to make the jump
Right.
and not go all in. It's true.
Right, that's true.
So I think here is
No, it's
our biggest,
absolutely
the
true.
biggest thing. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. I'd love to ask you guys, what have been some of the rules for the road that you'd like to give? Because I think you were going in that direction, just there. What are some of the things for creative people that are listening, who are interested, who have the stories in their head, who want to write the stories? Any just 2 or 3 points you want to share, words of wisdom, that were helpful to you, that maybe you didn't know when you got started. We'd love to hear those stories and learn those lessons from you.
Well, I heard some voices from your listeners say, pay African artists overseas. How do I know I can trust them? Because I don't know if I get my money back, especially if I can't pay them over PayPal. When you pay your artist, this is a relationship that if you're doing it via PayPal, you can always get your money back. We've found that many artists that we work with will show us samples or even complete the project and get paid upon delivery, which is great. So that's one of the rules. Don't just pay somebody totally upfront, because once they get the money, this project could last 3 to 6 months. I really thought we'd finish this book in 3 months, and it was bothering me that after the 6 months, and I was like, man, I want it to be done, but I need it to be done right. And there's 2 other people I'm depending on, because I need my wife for her expertise, and I need Ron to do this. And both of them had real life situations, from work to whatever, So you have to be patient when you're doing these type of partnerships, and know that, yes, you have a deadline, but it may not get met, but the goal will get met if you just keep pushing. And most people like to, not most people, but many people like to give up because it didn't go their way.
Right.
So don't give up.
Right.
Just keep pushing. If it takes over a year, keep pushing. If it takes 2 years, keep pushing and find out, what you can do to make it go quicker next time. So, yeah, and Tina has something.
I think that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, babe. I think for me, one of the most important things I learned is that you don't have to experience everything. I always say this, and people argue with me all the time. Experience is not the best teacher. It's a lie that we've been taught. Experience is your most costly teacher. If you try to experience everything, you're going to delay your project, delay your growth, spend way too much money. Well, if I want to do something, I just find someone that knows what they're doing, and then I piggyback off their experience. That way I don't have to make the same mistakes that they made. Like, for example, Kellen said he did a project. He did someone did a couple of pictures for him, and I think the cost was like what, $10 or something. $12, but it cost us through MoneyGram $8 to send $12, which was ridiculous. Like, what? Who would pay $8 to send $12?
Wow.
That's preposterous. So my point is, but if you come under the umbrella, and this is a little self-serving, I know, of Flamenco Publishing, maybe we send out 20 projects. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then we're paying this guy, say $100, but then the cost to send $100 is only $10. So you don't have to, there's value in community and in group work. And I think that a lot of times you have to find someone that's walking the path you want to walk on. That's something I do in my personal life. I have personal mentors for marriage, for relationships, for finances, for parenting. I find someone that's doing it better than me, and I go under the umbrella for a little amount of time, usually about 2 to 3 years, and then I move on. And that's how I think this is a valuable. You don't have to try to go there and reinvent the wheel. That's when it becomes overwhelming. For me, I break things into simple steps. Step number 1, write the story plan, period. Step number 2, find an artist that can get your face right, period. Step number 3, find someone that can do backgrounds, period. Step number 4, format the book for Kindle or whatever else you want to, or create space or whatever else you want to do. Step number 5, find someone to publish and market your book. Step number 6, make money. So, I mean, that's very summarized, but, so.
I love it.
I think for me, that's how the steps went. Kellen did with all the details. I don't know about those.
Right. Wow. I love that. And I would just like to encourage anybody who's listening, especially if you are African American, and what we have heard today, we need to take back control of our narrative. You need to be writing children's books. If you have that gift, you need to be asking God, what gifting that I have to take back our narrative so people can really see who we really are and not what somebody's perception of who we are is. So
Amen.
If anything else has come out of this conversation other than hopefully selling the book, is that whole thing right there needs to start happening. I'm sitting here right now thinking about what kind of children's books I'm going to write.
Exactly.
I can't wait to see both of your children's books or even young adult books.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is just the start. London has a book for the done. We did for a puzzle book for London and Sydney. The London and Sydney puzzle book, which will be coming out, later, maybe early next year. I don't know. It's done, but there's no need to rush. But there's, I want all my kids to just start writing. It can only help you in school. I finished my first book at like 10 or 11. So I want, and I never published it because it cost $10,000 when I was doing the research back when we had floppy disk.
Right.
It cost it cost $10,000 to publish a book, even to self-publish, unless you could get a deal. And no one had that for a kid who was 10 or 11 who got straight C's and D's until they got to college. So,
right.
And that would be a lot of money if I had straight A's, but we have to just have the kids do something. Summertime is coming up. We know crime goes up. We know, kids say they're bored. Now, if you're bored, write these books. If you're bored, write your math book, whatnot. It doesn't matter. But write something down so you won't be so bored, because if you're bored, you might be boring, is what I tell these young people.
Right.
Yeah, it's
That's right.
It's most definitely something that needs to happen, and especially one of the reasons why we're doing the library fundraiser for our church ministry school is because there are studies that have been done even now that if your kid is not reading by second grade, prisons are being built based on on that alone. They say if he cannot read fluently by the second grade, they will probably end up in prison. And we know that our DOJ just took up the ban on privatizing the prison system. So see the writing on the wall. We need to encourage our kids to read and give them stories that show them themselves in a different light than other things they see in the media.
That's right, Ty. But I also love what Kellen is saying, too, around getting kids to write, that they need to be reading. They need to see themselves. But we have a lot of bright kids that kind of go, and I don't think bright is defined by grades necessarily. I'm talking about kids with, we have this whole study now in education around multiple intelligence. So all kids don't do well in English and math or standardized tests. That's not the only way of defining whether a child has potential. But so many of our kids are creative. I mean, in order to write this poetry that is rap music, you got to be bright. I mean, so to take that energy and to put it into writing, I just love your point on that they need to be reading. They need to see themselves. But there are kids sitting at home this summer doing a whole bunch of nothing. And so why not ask them to express themselves? My mom would not have idle hands. You had to be busy. You're doing something. And I love that because it definitely fostered within me a sense of achievement. I feel frustrated at the end of the day, even if it's a weekend or a vacation, if something didn't accomplish. Maybe the thing to be accomplished today was rest, but whatever it is, maybe this becomes a point of accomplishment for our young kids. Asking them to write a short story, write poetry, to write, to communicate. I've had 2 conversations today with adults where at the end of the day, it really came down to communication. People not understanding a particular point because it was not communicated well. So why not, for lots and lots of reasons, encourage our kids to refine their communication skills and their ability to tell stories? Do you know that now for corporate people, there's a whole new industry around storytelling? You can be certified as a storyteller. Workshops and books being written on storytelling. I came up when that was just something you do. What are you talking about? Certification? Really? And executives are paying top dollar to go to people who communicate as well as the 4 of us to teach them an introduction, 3 points, and a poem and a conclusion. That's
right.
I don't understand it. But nevertheless, the point is that our kids can definitely grow by reading, but also by writing, and really encouraging that part of them certainly could be a sense of accomplishment that they could be so very proud of.
Right.
I echo what you say. That's so critical. I echo what you say. As an African woman growing up, one of the problems with cultures that are not from the West, with non-Western cultures, was that our history was never documented in writing. Today you can go to Europe and you visit an old castle from the 15th century, and they can tell you that on October 1st, this person was born, that person was born, and the Lord and Lady of the Manor did this, and they had this and this for lunch. Most of our stories in Africa were told around the fireside, which is why we do well lyrically and really in music and singing, because that's drumming in Africa is a way of communication. There's a drum to announce a funeral. There's a drum to announce a new birth. There's like music and dancing to announce a marriage, a wedding, an engagement. And even growing up, I spend most of my time when I was around my grandparents, we just sit around the house and just tell stories to each other. The problem is, once those stories are told and no one writes them, then the person who writes the story documents and becomes the authority on your story, which goes back to what the British people did. British just sent explorers around the world, and all they were doing was just like, okay, there are 500 pygmies. The pygmies are different from these people in this way. The Bantus are different from the Zulus in this way. And today, if you go back and look at African history, actually, the saddest thing is there is no documentation of names of countries until the British came, until the Europeans came, because everybody just did storytelling by verbal.
Right.
And once die, then the next generation just interprets their own story however way they wanted to. And most African villages had like one person that was in charge of the stories for everybody else. But I think the reason why we're putting this on thousands of years later, and that's one thing that differentiated the Egyptians from everybody else, was that they had a written language before most cultures did. Hieroglyphics are well documented. But the problem is, for the rest of African history, we just have to go with whoever wrote the first book. They're the authority on it. And that's so true for us today. If you don't take the time to, even if all you felt, even if, look at Tupac's life, most of his life today is being told either by the music he wrote, what inspired him to write it, the interviews he gave, and this man only lived for 25 years. He's not that old. I'm 33 years old. You know, and if all you, and I want to take away that idea, even if all you document is a YouTube video about your experience and about maybe no one buys, maybe no one watches it, but what that does is it documents that you taught this at this time and that was your perspective. I always tell Kellen, I don't have to agree with everybody, but I'll always voice my opinion. So I want people to know what I taught. If I was against it, I was. Let it be clear, let it be known, everybody. Tina was against this, and I walked out. Women taking notes. It's so important because if you don't voice an opinion or if you choose to be quiet, you are giving your personal power away and you cannot complain, you know, when everything else happens. So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, I totally
very,
agree.
very good.
Yeah.
I love that. Go ahead, Todd. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And the whole writing piece is even important as far as our kids in their education, academic careers as well. One of the things that we were talking off air about Taylor, this being her senior year, when she started, she had classmates who could not enter college as a college student. They entered college as a taking remedial classes because they could not write. And they were not able to write papers and that kind of deal. So they received a temporary or some type of and she'll probably text me in a minute because I'll get it wrong. A temporary acceptance into the college. After they finished the remedial classes, then they were accepted as a full-time student. But you have paid a year of college tuition to take high school English and math.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And that is
You know,
happening
you really
to
need
our
to talk to my
students.
mom about this, Ty. I mean, seriously, you need to talk to my mom about this because my mom, for our audience, is a retired college professor of English.
Yeah.
And she can tell you with more stories than any of us have time to hear about the problems that she experienced over a course of 40 years and the disintegration of English skills with students. And Mom worked at a community college for a large part of her career.
Right.
And so a lot of times what would happen is students would take, you know, class A, B, C, and D during the school year, but they would come home and take their English classes from their community college.
Right.
And she could tell you, I don't care where they come from. They can come from UT. They can come from Texas A&M. These kids' skills are remedial. They are not on par with where they should be. And so she found herself not just teaching, because she taught those freshman English classes. That's why she could tell you.
Right.
She taught those when they came, the pipeline right out of high school led right to her classroom. And too many times, kids were not prepared over the years, and the longer she stayed in the industry, the worse it got. And in fact, she was teaching remedial. She started teaching remedial classes, just what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That was her experience to help kids get on par. Now, let me tell you what bothered me the most about this. Probably the saddest part of my mom's career as a college professor was that not only was she teaching kids, but there was a time, I don't know if you guys remember, but in Texas, there was a standardized standardized test that came out, and it wasn't for students. The standardized test was for teachers. It was called the TCAT. My mom did workshops all over town, not for students, but for teachers. She found that it's not just our English students who were struggling. It was English teachers who were struggling to teach English or to write it themselves or communicate themselves. We have a real problem.
Wow.
This whole issue of literacy it opened my eyes. I said, okay, well, no wonder the kids are struggling so hard. If all you have them doing is a bunch of worksheets and you've got the answer key, at the end of the day, who can write? Who's teaching writing? And which one of our kids are really taking? I know your kid has got it, my kid has got it, but too many of our kids, this very critical skill for advancement, they don't have it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we're going to go back to trying to sell this book. But because we can get on that for real. And you guys will be right there with us. But I really am excited about the story of Sydney and London's. I'm trying to pull it up on my phone. That conversation just took me in. Because
I know,
really,
when I saw teachers and the teachers couldn't write, that's a real problem.
I have seen the benefit of what it does when your kids are readers early. Taylor Taylor asked us to go to school. She was 4 years old. She was, at home at daycare, being taught. Her Benita was teaching her daughter at home, homeschooling, and Taylor came home and said, "I want to learn too. I want to go to school." 4 years old.
Now,
had not even been in the school a month. We were having our first parent meeting because she was that young, and we wanted to know, was this a benefit for us to be paying tuition at this age? And on the way to the meeting, Taylor said, "Mommy and Daddy, could you tell them to teach me how to read?" Because the kids were reading to her at nap time. She didn't want them to read it. She wanted to read to herself at 4 years old, and wind up reading King James Version of the Bible at 4 years old fluently, and then winning a reading contest when she was in the second grade, over 70,000 second graders. So I have seen the benefit of having it helped her through school. She loves to read. She loves to write. And it helped her in her college studies. So we're not just talking about something that is not beneficial to your kids. So children's books that is what caught her attention and what arrested her interest in reading and writing. So I'm excited about Tina and Kellen's book, and I hope that you go out and get it. The name of the book is London and Sydney Explore the World. And the first book of that series is The Adventures of Sydney and London, Texas. And it is an excellently done book, period.
Thank you.
So, I mean, and I love it. I've looked at it, and I cannot wait to get a copy of it for our school library, Inspiring to Will Praise Church Christian Academy. So,
come on, hello.
But tell them how they can get the book and how they can get in contact with you guys, not only to purchase the book, but to get it hooked up with your publishing company, and that if they are interested in writing, that they can connect with you and you can help them. Because I've known Kellen for 5 years now. I've been on this show for 5 years. The guests that I talk to, authors, movie writers, people who are behind the scenes doing great things, most of them have come through the contacts that he has. So he is not just some person that's not doing this. He is in contact with these people, and he knows what he's doing. So give them the information on how to get in contact with you.
Well, for them, if they want to buy the book, real simple, real easy. They can go on Amazon, put in London and Sydney book. It will pop right up. If you don't remember the whole name of London and Sydney Explore the World, but it's the only children's book of London and Sydney. It's the only book of London and Sydney. They can also go to londonandsydney.com if they want to reach us, and the executives at Flamenco Publishing will make sure that we get that, because as of right now, those all go to the same email box, and I'll make sure that we make contact and say, hello, how can we help you? But if they just want to buy the book, they can buy it, whether it's the Kindle version or if they want to buy the paperback. It's coming out on Apple. We hope that on Apple and the Nooks and everything else, it will be available by next week. All that is still processing, and everything is just processing. It takes a minute, but if they have the Apple, you put a phone reminder on your phone and say, let's check for the book. But it will be on all platforms very, very soon. And, we're here. We're here for you to share our journey, from the LondonandSydney.com. If you want to go check out the YouTube, that's on my personal YouTube and on the London and Sydney YouTube. They can check that out as well, of our journey behind the scenes. And those are long videos. And like I said, we're working on a mini doc for it to make it a little more educational, so people can really see what everything it took to make this book happen. But the first part is purchase the book, because it takes money to do all these things. And also, just like the movies, the more people who purchase it, the more books we can do, and the quicker. The more that the powers that be say, wow, black folks really want to see black books. And not just black people, but I have non-black people who say, I buy black books just so my kids can see diversity, especially here in Seattle. They say it over and over. So everybody's welcome to get this book. But if you really care about diversity and inclusion and black authors and black storytellers, purchase it, because it takes a lot to do this.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, guys, on an excellently done book, and we look forward to the success of this book and the series as a whole. Are you guys going to do dolls or anything like that to go with the book as well?
Mm-hmm. Tina must have called you right before this interview, Ty. I know you met her. But yes, I'm working on, it has to be done right. So again, that's an international push usually to make it affordable for everyone. So I'm not trying to sell those expensive $100 dolls everyone buys in the mall that don't look like them. So I'm working on the dolls right now. It's just finding the right everything. So, it's coming, and we also have, the glasses people can get, and there's even sheets if they want to get sheets, bed sheets. But I'm working on all of that. I'm just so focused right now on getting it on all platforms so people can really fall in love with the girls, right, and demand it. And they're going to make me not go to sleep and make me get these deals done and make me hire people, more people and more people. So, yeah, it's coming.
Very good. Well, thank you guys.
I love that. And I tell you what, I've got a 9-year-old, and I just walked, I'm with her now, and she's holding her expensive doll. So you have our support. We are going to buy the book today, and I'm looking forward to the doll and everything else that you have. I just love you guys' concept and your spirit, and just congratulations on all your hard work, and just many blessings on everything to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, guys, we are so thankful that you spent some time with us today, and congratulations again, and much success. And you know where we are. Every time you release something new, come on back. Yeah,
we'll do. You know that.
And I'm sure Tina.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I was thinking you had to go put out another fire.
No, right here.
Our babies don't always be quiet when we need them to be quiet. So I know y'all got little ones running around there handling things. So, but thank you guys for spending time with us today. And we're going to have to have you guys come back and talk about the whole taking back our stories portion. I really love that conversation about empowering our community as well. So we look forward to getting you guys back to talk about that as well. We're going to get out and get some commercials done, and we'll be right back.